On the coldest night of winter, Daniel heard scratching at his door. Expecting wind or maybe a stray dog, he opened it and froze. A massive bear, shivering and weak, begged for warmth inside his cabin. Against every instinct, Daniel stepped aside. What followed would defy belief and change everything. Daniel Whitmore had grown used to silence. Since his wife Clara passed away 3 winters earlier, the world outside his small cabin felt as frozen as the lake that stretched beyond the pine trees. He lived alone on the edge of town, in a crooked log house with a chimney that never quite stopped smoking. The neighbors rarely saw him except on supply runs. That January, the storms were worse than usual. Snow piled higher than fence posts. Wind clawed at the roof, whistling through the cracks. Daniel stayed inside, wrapped in wool, sipping coffee that never seemed hot enough. His only company was the fire. But even fire has its limits. On one particular night, the storm shrieked with a force that rattled windows. The temperature dropped so low that Daniel swore the air inside his lungs turned to ice. He stoked the fire and pulled his coat tight, whispering to Clara's photograph on the mantel. "We'll make it through, love. We always did." He was pouring another mug when he heard it. A sound against the door. Not the moan of wind. Not the rattle of branches. Scratching. Slow. Desperate. Daniel's breath caught. He reached for the rifle propped by the wall, creeping toward the door. "Probably a stray dog," he muttered. But deep down, something told him otherwise. The scratching grew louder. A heavy thud followed, as if something leaned its weight against the wood. Daniel unlatched the lock and cracked the door open, just enough to peek outside. And what he saw nearly stopped his heart. A bear. Not upright and threatening, but slumped in the snow, its fur frosted white, its sides heaving. Steam rose faintly from its muzzle. Its eyes, amber, glazed, almost pleading, lifted to meet Daniel's. For a moment, man and beast stared at each other in the howling blizzard. Then the bear shifted, pressing its nose against the crack of the door. Not pushing with force, but nudging, begging. Daniel slammed the door shut, heart hammering. "Good Lord!" His hands trembled on the rifle. Every instinct screamed, "A bear in your house is death." But another voice, softer, rose from memory. Clara's voice. She had loved animals, even the broken and the wild. She once carried a wounded owl home in her coat. "Every creature deserves warmth," she used to say. Daniel swallowed hard, staring at the door. The scratching returned, weaker now. Finally, with a curse that was half prayer, Daniel opened the door wide. "All right then, come in if you're gonna." The bear stumbled forward, collapsing just inside the threshold. Snow melted instantly onto the floorboards. Its body shook violently, but it made no move toward Daniel. It simply lay near the fire, massive frame curled, shivering like a dying dog. Daniel stood frozen, rifle tight in his grip, until minutes passed and nothing happened. Slowly, cautiously, he lowered it. "Well, looks like it's just you and me." He spent that first night on edge, barely blinking, watching the animal thaw by the fire. The bear didn't growl, didn't lunge, only slept. By dawn, steam rose from its fur, filling the cabin with a musky, earthy scent. When Daniel stirred, the bear's eyes opened, slow, heavy, but calm. Daniel grabbed leftover venison from the icebox and tossed it across the floor. The bear sniffed, then ate with surprising gentleness. Daniel exhaled. "Guess you're hungry too." That was how it began. Days passed. The storm raged on. The bear, Daniel started calling him Frost for obvious reasons, remained. At first Daniel thought he'd leave once strong enough. But Frost stayed near the fire, rising only to lap water from the tin bucket or to nose gently at the door before curling back down. Each night Daniel expected trouble, but instead he found something else. Company. He spoke aloud again, words tumbling into the quiet. About Clara. About his loneliness. About the ache of growing old alone. And though Frost gave no answers, his steady breathing filled the silences Clara once had. One evening, Daniel leaned back in his chair, staring at the flames. She would have liked you, you know, Clara. She would have laughed at me for being scared. Frost shifted, resting his heavy head closer to Daniel's boots, as if he understood. The cabin no longer felt like a tomb, but outside danger grew. Word spread in town. A bear was prowling near the lake. Hunters began talking. Traps were set. Daniel heard them when he went for supplies. Damn beast won't last long. One man spat. Daniel's stomach twisted. He couldn't tell them Frost wasn't prowling. He was resting by his fire. One night, the danger arrived at Daniel's own door. He was drifting near sleep when Frost lifted his head, ears sharp. Moments later, heavy steps crunched outside. Voices. Men. Tracks lead this way, someone whispered. Daniel's blood ran cold. Before he could move, Frost rose. For the first time since entering the cabin, the bear stood to his full height, massive and terrifying. A deep growl rumbled through the walls, so low Daniel felt it in his chest. The voices stopped. Then hurried footsteps retreated into the dark. Frost lowered himself again, breathing slow, calm, protecting, not threatening. Daniel's eyes burned. "You saved me," he whispered. From then on, Daniel no longer thought of Frost as a guest. He was something closer, a guardian. Stranger still were the gifts Frost began bringing. A pine branch stripped smooth. A clump of wildflowers dragged in by his teeth. Even an antler shed, placed awkwardly by the fire. Daniel gathered them in Clara's old wooden box, the one she'd once used for jewelry. He called it Frost's collection. And sometimes, Daniel swore the bear did things that reminded him of her. Tilting his head when Daniel sang an old hymn. Curling in the same spot where Clara used to sit by the fire. Once, Frost sneezed 3 times in rhythm, the same way Clara's old cat had whenever she sprinkled herbs on the floor. It made Daniel wonder, was Frost just a bear? Or something more, something sent? But just as the bond felt unbreakable, everything changed. One morning, Daniel awoke to silence. The space by the fire was empty. The door stood slightly ajar. Frost was gone. Daniel rushed outside. Snow stretched in every direction. No tracks, no sign, nothing. He searched for days, returning each night with hope clawing at his chest. But Frost never came back. The cabin felt emptier than ever. And yet Daniel realized something new. The silence no longer crushed him. The fire still warmed. The gifts in the wooden box glowed with memory, not sorrow. Frost had left him something: strength, purpose, life. Weeks later, Daniel shared his story in town. People listened, skeptical at first, then silent, moved. Children leaned forward, wide-eyed. He told them about fear turned into trust, about a frozen bear begging for warmth, about the miracle of unexpected companionship. He ended simply, "Sometimes, the thing you fear most is the very thing sent to heal you." Back at the cabin, Daniel still keeps the fire burning. Some nights he swears he hears a rustle outside, or the faint sound of breathing in the storm. He whispers into the dark, "Thank you, Frost, for everything." And though the bear never returned, Daniel knew one truth as certain as winter. He was no longer alone. A man, a storm, and a bear that should have been an enemy but became a savior. Sometimes, the most unexpected visitors arrive to remind us of what we've lost, and what we're still capable of finding.